Well, this is odd. You're one of those sort they call eccentrics, I judge. The saying is, you mustn't judge a man by his clothes, and I'm believing it now. Why yours are looking just ratty, don't you know? And yet you must be rich. I am. The young man walked slowly back to the town, deeply musing as he went. He halted a moment in front of the best restaurant, then glanced at his clothes and passed on and got his breakfast at a stand-up. There was a good deal of it, and it cost 5 shillings. He tendered a sovereign, got his change, glanced at his silver, muttered to himself, "There isn't enough to buy clothes with," and went his way. At 9:30, the richest wool broker in Sydney was sitting in his morning room at home, settling his breakfast with the morning paper. A servant put his head in and said, "There's a sundowner at the door wants to see you, sir." "What do you bring that kind of a message here for? Send him about his business." "He won't go, sir, I've tried." "He won't go, that's unusual. He's one of two things then, he's a remarkable person or he's crazy. Is he crazy?" "No, sir, he don't look it." "Then he's remarkable. What does he say he wants?" "He won't tell, sir, only says it's very important." "And won't go, does he say he won't go?" "Says he'll stand there till he sees you, sir, if it's all day." "And yet isn't crazy, show him up." The sundowner was shown in. The broker said to himself, "No, he's not crazy, that is easy to see, so he must be the other thing." Then aloud, "Well, my good fellow, be quick about it. Don't waste any words, what is it you want?" "I want to borrow 100,000 pounds. "Scott, it's a mistake, he is crazy." "No, he can't be, not with that eye." "Why, you take my breath away, come, who are you?" "Nobody that you know." "What is your name?" "Cecil Rhodes." "No, I don't remember hearing the name before. Now then, just for curiosity's sake, what has sent you to me on this extraordinary errand?" "The intention to make 100,000 pounds for you, and as much for myself within the next 60 days. "Well, well, well, it is the most extraordinary idea that sit down, you interest me. And somehow you fascinate me. I think that is about the word. And it isn't your proposition, no, that doesn't fascinate me, it's something else, I don't quite know what, something that's born in you and oozes out of you, I suppose. Now then, just for curiosity's sake again, nothing more, as I understand it, it is your desire to bore." "I said intention." "Pardon, so you did. I thought it was an unheedful use of the word, an unheedful valuing of its strength, you know." "I knew its strength." "Well, I must say, but look here, let me walk the floor a little. My mind is getting into a sort of whirl, though you don't seem disturbed any. Plainly, this young fellow isn't crazy, but as to his being remarkable, well, really he amounts to that and something over. Now then, I believe I am beyond the reach of further astonishment. Strike and spare not. What is your scheme?" "To buy the wool crop, deliverable in 60 days." "What, the whole of it?" "The whole of it." "No, I was not quite out of the reach of surprises, after all. Why, how you talk. Do you know what our crop is going to foot up?" 2.5 million sterling, maybe a little more." "Well, you've got your statistics right, anyway. Now then, do you know what the margins would foot up to buy it at 60 days? "The 100,000 pounds I came here to get." "Right once more. Well, dear me, just to see what would happen, I wish you had the money. And if you had it, what would you do with it?" "I shall make 200,000 pounds out of it in 60 days." "You mean, of course, that you might make it if—" "I said shall." "Yes, by George, you did say shall. You are the most definite devil I ever saw in the matter of language. Dear, 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 look here. Definite speech means clarity of mind. Upon my word, I believe you've got what you believe to be a rational reason for venturing into this house, an entire stranger, on this wild scheme of buying the wool crop of an entire colony on speculation. Bring it out, I am prepared, acclimatized, if I may use the word. Why would you buy the crop, and why would you make that sum out of it? That is to say, what makes you think you—" "I don't think I know." "Definite again, how do you know?" "Because France has declared war against Germany, and wool has gone up 14% in London and is still rising." "Oh, indeed, now then, I've got you. Such a thunderbolt as you have just let fly ought to have made me jump out of my chair, but it didn't stir me the least little bit, you see. And for a very simple reason, I have read the morning paper. You can look at it if you want to. The fastest ship in the service arrived at 11 o'clock last night, 50 days out from London. All her news is printed here. There are no war clouds anywhere. And as for wool, why, it is the low-spiritist commodity in the English market. It is your turn to jump now. Well, why don't you jump? Why do you sit there in that placid fashion when? Because I have later news. Later news, oh come, later news than 50 days, brought steaming hot from London by the. My news is only 10 days old. Oh Munchausen, hear the maniac talk, where did you get it? Got it out of a shark. Oh, this is too much. Front. Call the police, bring the gun, raise the town. All the asylums in Christendom have broken loose in the single person of. Sit down and collect yourself. Where is the use in getting excited? Am I excited? There is nothing to get excited about. When I make a statement which I cannot prove, it will be time enough for you to begin to offer hospitality to damaging fancies about me and my sanity. Oh, a thousand pardons. I ought to be ashamed of myself, and I am ashamed of myself for thinking that a little bit of a circumstance like sending a shark to England to fetch back a market report. What does your middle initial stand for, sir? Andrew, what are you writing? Wait a moment, proof about the shark and another matter. Only 10 lines. There, now it is done, sign it. Many thanks, many. Let me see, it says, oh, come, this is interesting. Why, look here. Prove what you say here, and I'll put up the money and double as much if necessary and divide the winnings with you half and half. There, now, I've signed, make your promise good if you can. Show me a copy of the London Times only 10 days old. Here it is, and with it these buttons and a memorandum book that belonged to the man the shark swallowed. Swallowed him in the Thames without a doubt. For you will notice that the last entry in the book is dated, London, and is of the same date as the Times, and says, Bur confequence der Kragecephala run, reif acute nach Deutschland ob, or back ich Main Leben auf dem Alter. Main's Lands Legend Mag, as clean native German as anybody can put upon paper, and means that in consequence of the declaration of war, this loyal soul is leaving for home today to fight. And he did leave too, but the shark had him before the day was done, poor fellow. And a pity too, but there are times for mourning, and we will attend to this case further on. Other matters are pressing, now. I will go down and set the machinery in motion in a quiet way and buy the crop. It will cheer the drooping spirits of the boys in a transitory way. Everything is transitory in this world. 60 days hence, when they are called to deliver the goods, they will think they've been struck by lightning. But there is a time for mourning, and we will attend to that case along with the other one. Come along, I'll take you to my tailor. What did you say your name is? Cecil Rhodes. It is hard to remember. However, I think you will make it easier by and by if you live. There are 3 kinds of people: commonplace men, remarkable men, and lunatics. I'll classify you with the remarkables and take the chances. The deal went through, and secured to the young stranger the first fortune he ever pocketed. The people of Sydney ought to be afraid of the sharks, but for some reason they do not seem to be. On Saturdays the young men go out in their boats, and sometimes the water is fairly covered with the little sails. A boat upsets now and then, by accident, a result of tumultuous skylarking. Sometimes the boys upset their boat for fun, such as it is with sharks visibly waiting around for just such an occurrence. The young fellows scramble aboard whole, sometimes, not always. Tragedies have happened more than once. While I was in Sydney, it was reported that a boy fell out of a boat in the mouth of the Parramatta River and screamed for help, and a boy jumped overboard from another boat to save him from the assembling sharks. But the sharks made swift work with the lives of both. The government pays a bounty for the shark. To get the bounty, the fishermen bait the hook or the seine with agreeable mutton. The news spreads and the sharks come from all over the Pacific Ocean to get the free board. In time, the shark culture will be one of the most successful things in the colony. Chapter 14. We can secure other people's approval if we do right and try hard, but our own is worth 100 of it, and no way has been found out of securing that. Pudd'nhead Wilson's New Calendar. My health had broken down in New York in May. It had remained in a doubtful but fairish condition during a succeeding period of 82 days. It broke again on the Pacific. It broke again in Sydney, but not until after I had had a good outing, and had also filled my lecture engagements. This latest break lost me the chance of seeing Queensland. In the circumstances, to go north toward hotter weather was not advisable. So we moved south with a westward slant, 17 hours by rail to the capital of the colony of Victoria, Melbourne, that juvenile city of 60 years and 500,000 inhabitants. On the map, the distance looks small, but that is a trouble with all divisions of distance in such a vast country as Australia. The colony of Victoria itself looks small on the map, looks like a county, in fact, yet it is about as large as England, Scotland, and Wales combined. Or, to get another focus upon it, it is just 80 times as large as the state of Rhode Island and one-third as large as the state of Texas. Outside of Melbourne, Victoria seems to be owned by a handful of squatters, each with a Rhode Island for a sheep farm. That is the impression which one gathers from common talk, yet the wool industry of Victoria is by no means so great as that of New South Wales. The climate of Victoria is favorable to other great industries, among others, wheat growing and the making of wine. We took the train at Sydney at about 4 in the afternoon. It was American in one way, for we had a most rational sleeping car. Also, the car was clean and fine and new, nothing about it to suggest the rolling stock of the continent of Europe. But our baggage was weighed and extra weight charged for. That was continental. Continental and troublesome. Any detail of railroading that is not troublesome cannot honorably be described as continental. The tickets were round-trip ones, to Melbourne, and clear to Adelaide in South Australia, and then all the way back to Sydney. 1,200 more miles than we really expected to make. But then, as the round trip wouldn't cost much more than the single trip, it seemed well enough to buy as many miles as one could afford, even if one was not likely to need them. A human being has a natural desire to have more of a good thing than he needs. Now comes a singular thing, the oddest thing, the strangest thing, the most baffling and unaccountable marvel that Australasia can show. At the frontier between New South Wales and Victoria, our multitude of passengers were rooted out of their snug beds by lantern light in the morning, in the biting cold of a high altitude to change cars on a road that has no break in it from Sydney to Melbourne. Think of the paralysis of intellect that gave that idea birth. Imagine the boulder it emerged from on some petrified legislator's shoulders. It is a narrow gauge road to the frontier, and a broader gauge thence to Melbourne. The two governments were the builders of the road and are the owners of it. One or two reasons are given for this curious state of things. One is that it represents the jealousy existing between the colonies, the two most important colonies of Australasia. What the other one is, I have forgotten. But it is of no consequence. It could be but another effort to explain the inexplicable. All passengers fret at the double gauge. All shippers of freight must of course fret at it. Unnecessary expense, delay, and annoyance are imposed upon everybody concerned, and no one is benefited. Each Australian colony fences itself off from its neighbor with a custom house. Personally, I have no objection, but it must be a good deal of inconvenience to the people. We have something resembling it here and there in America, but it goes by another name. The large empire of the Pacific coast requires a world of iron machinery, and could manufacture it economically on the spot if the imposts on foreign iron were removed. But they are not. Protection to Pennsylvania and Alabama forbids it. The result to the Pacific coast is the same as if there were several rows of custom fences between the coast and the east. Iron carted across the American continent at luxurious railway rates would be valuable enough to be coined when it arrived. We changed cars. This was at Albury. And it was there, I think, that the growing day and the early sun exposed the distant range called the Blue Mountains, accurately named. My word, as the Australians say, but it was a stunning color, that blue. Deep, strong, rich, exquisite, towering and majestic masses of blue, a softly luminous blue, a smoldering blue, as if vaguely lit by fires within. It extinguished the blue of the sky, made it pallid and unwholesome, whitey and washed out. A wonderful color, just divine. A resident told me that those were not mountains. He said they were rabbit piles, and explained that long exposure and the overripe condition of the rabbits was what made them look so blue. This man may have been right, but much reading of books of travel has made me distrustful of gratis information furnished by unofficial residents of a country. The facts which such people give to travelers are usually erroneous, and often intemperately so. The rabbit plague has indeed been very bad in Australia, and it could account for one mountain, but not for a mountain range, it seems to me. It is too large an order. We breakfasted at the station, a good breakfast except the coffee, and cheap. The government establishes the prices and placards them. The waiters were men, I think, but that is not usual in Australasia. The usual thing is to have girls. No, not girls, young ladies, generally duchesses, dress. They would attract attention at any royal levee in Europe. Even empresses and queens do not dress as they do. Not that they could not afford it, perhaps, but they would not know how. All the pleasant morning we slid smoothly along over the plains, through thin, Not thick forests of great melancholy gum trees, with trunks rugged with curled sheets of flaking bark, erysipelas convalescents, so to speak, shedding their dead skins. And all along were tiny cabins, built sometimes of wood, sometimes of gray-blue corrugated iron, and the doorsteps and fences were clogged with children, rugged little simply clad chaps that looked as if they had been imported from the banks of the Mississippi without breaking bulk. And there were little villages, with neat stations well placarded with showy advertisements, mainly of almost two self-righteous brands of sheep dip. If that is the name, and I think it is a stuff like tar, and is dabbed onto places where the shearer clips a piece out of the sheep. It bars out the flies and has healing properties and a nip to it which makes the sheep skip like the cattle on 1,000 hills. It is not good to eat. That is, it is not good to eat except when mixed with railroad coffee. It improves railroad coffee. Without it, railroad coffee is too vague, but with it, it is quite assertive and enthusiastic. By itself, railroad coffee is too passive, but sheep dip makes it wake up and get down to business. I wonder where they get railroad coffee. We saw birds, but not a kangaroo, not an emu, not an ornithorhynchus, not a lecturer, not a native. Indeed, the land seemed quite destitute of game. But I have misused the word native. In Australia, it is applied to Australian-born whites only. I should have said that we saw no aboriginals, no blackfellows, and to this day I have never seen one. In the great museums, you will find all the other curiosities, but in the curio of chiefest interest to the stranger all of them are lacking. We have at home an abundance of museums, and not an American Indian in them. It is clearly an absurdity, but it never struck me before. Chapter 15. Truth is stranger than fiction, to some people, but I am measurably familiar with it. Pudd'nhead Wilson's New Calendar. Truth is stranger than fiction, but it is because fiction is obliged to stick to possibilities, truth is. Pudd'nhead Wilson's New Calendar. The air was balmy and delicious, the sunshine radiant. It was a charming excursion. In the course of it we came to a town whose odd name was famous all over the world a quarter of a century ago, Wagga Wagga. This was because the Tichborne claimant had kept a butcher shop there. It was out of the midst of his humble collection of sausages and tripe that he soared up into the zenith of notoriety and hung there in the wastes of space a time, with the telescopes of all nations leveled at him in unappeasable curiosity. Curiosity as to which of the two long-missing persons he was. Arthur Orton, the mislaid roustabout of Wapping, or Sir Roger Tichborne, the lost of a name and estates as old as English history. We all know now, but not a dozen people knew then. And the dozen kept the mystery to themselves and allowed the most intricate and fascinating and marvelous real-life romance that has ever been played upon the world's stage to unfold itself serenely, act by act, in a British court by the long and laborious processes of judicial development. When we recall the details of that great romance, we marvel to see what daring chances truth may freely take in constructing a tale, as compared with the poor little conservative risks permitted to fiction. The fiction artist could achieve no success with the materials of this splendid Tichborne romance. He would have to drop out the chief characters. The public would say such people are impossible. He would have to drop out a number of the most picturesque incidents. The public would say such things could never happen. And yet the chief characters did exist, and the incidents did happen. It cost the Tichborne estates $400,000 to unmask the claimant and drive him out. And even after the exposure, multitudes of Englishmen still believed in him. It cost the British government another $400,000 to convict him of perjury. And after the conviction, the same old multitudes still believed in him. And among these believers were many educated and intelligent men, and some of them had personally known the real Sir Roger. The claimant was sentenced to 14 years imprisonment. When he got out of prison, he went to New York and kept a whiskey saloon in the Bowery for a time, then disappeared from view. He always claimed to be Sir Roger Tichborne until death called for him. This was but a few months ago, not very much short of a generation since he left Wagga Wagga to go and possess himself of his estates. On his deathbed, he yielded up his secret and confessed in writing that he was only Arthur Orton of Wapping, able seaman and butcher, that and nothing more. But it is scarcely to be doubted that there are people whom even his dying confession will not convince. The old habit of assimilating incredibilities must have made strong food a necessity in their case. A weaker article would probably disagree with them. I was in London when the claimant stood his trial for perjury. I attended one of his showy evenings in the sumptuous quarters provided for him from the purses of his adherents and well-wishers. He was in evening dress, and I thought him a rather fine and stately creature. There were about 25 gentlemen present. Educated men, men moving in good society, none of them commonplace. Some of them were men of distinction, none of them were obscurities. They were his cordial friends and admirers. It was Sir Roger, always Sir Roger, on all hands. No one withheld the title, all turned it from the tongue with unction, and as if it tasted good. For many years I had had a mystery in stock. Melbourne, and only Melbourne, could unriddle it for me. In 1873, I arrived in London with my wife and young child, and presently received a note from Naples signed by a name not familiar to me. It was not Bascom, and it was not Henry, but I will call it Henry Bascom for convenience's sake. This note of about 6 lines was written on a strip of white paper whose edges were ragged. I came to be familiar with those strips in later years. Their size and pattern were always the same. Their contents were usually to the same effect. Would I and mine come to the writer's country place in England on such and such a date, by such and such a train, and stay 12 days and depart by such and such a train at the end of the specified time? A carriage would meet us at the station. These invitations were always for a long time ahead. If we were in Europe, 3 months ahead. If we were in America, 6 to 12 months ahead. They always named the exact date and train for the beginning and also for the end of the visit. This first note invited us for a date 3 months in the future. It asked us to arrive by the 4:10 p.m. train from London, August 6th. The carriage would be waiting. The carriage would take us away 7 days later train specified, and there were these words, "Speak to Tom Hughes." I showed the note to the author of Tom Brown at Rugby, and he said, "Accept and be thankful." He described Mr. Bascom as being a man of genius, a man of fine attainments, a choice man in every way, a rare and beautiful character. He said that Bascom Hall was a particularly fine example of the stately manorial mansion of Elizabeth's days, and that it was a house worth going a long way to see. Like Noel, that Mr. B was of a social disposition, liked the company of agreeable people, and always had samples of the sort coming and going. We paid the visit. We paid others in later years, the last one in 1879. Soon after that, Mr. Bascom started on a voyage around the world in a steam yacht, a long and leisurely trip, for he was making collections, in all lands, of birds, butterflies, and such things. The day that President Garfield was shot by the assassin Guido, we were at a little watering place on Long Island Sound, and in the mail matter of that day came a letter with the Melbourne postmark on it. It was for my wife, but I recognized Mr. Bascom's handwriting on the envelope and opened it. It was the usual note, as to paucity of lines, and was written on the customary strip of paper, but there was nothing usual about the contents. The note informed my wife that if it would be any assuagement of her grief to know that her husband's lecture tour in Australia was a satisfactory venture from the beginning to the end, he, the writer, could testify that such was the case. Also, that her husband's untimely death had been mourned by all classes, as she would already know by the press telegrams long before the reception of this note, that the funeral was attended by the officials of the colonial and city governments, and that while he, the writer, her friend and mine, had not reached Melbourne in time to see the body, he had at least had the sad privilege of acting as one of the pallbearers. Signed, Henry Bascom. My first thought was, why didn't he have the coffin opened? He would have seen that the corpse was an impostor, and he could have gone right ahead and dried up the most of those tears, and comforted those sorrowing governments, and sold the remains and sent me the money. I did nothing about the matter. I had set the law after living lecture doubles of mine a couple of times in America, and the law had not been able to catch them. Others in my trade had tried to catch their impostor doubles and had failed. Then where was the use in harrying a ghost? None, and so I did not disturb it. I had a curiosity to know about that man's lecture tour and last moments, but that could wait. When I should see Mr. Bascom, he would tell me all about it. But he passed from life, and I never saw him again. My curiosity faded away. However, when I found that I was going to Australia, it revived. And naturally, for if the people should say that I was a dull, poor thing compared to what I was before I died, it would have a bad effect on business. Well, to my surprise, the Sydney journalists had never heard of that impostor. I pressed them, but they were firm. They had never heard of him and didn't believe in him. I could not understand it. Still, I thought it would all come right in Melbourne. The government would remember, and the other mourners. At the supper of the Institute of Journalists, I should find out all about the matter. But no, it turned out that they had never heard of it. So my mystery was a mystery still. It was a great disappointment. I believed it would never be cleared up in this life, so I dropped it out of my mind. But at last, just when I was least expecting it. However, this is not the place for the rest of it. I shall come to the matter again in a far distant chapter. Chapter 16. There is a moral sense, and there is an immoral sense. History shows us that the moral sense enables us to perceive morality and how to avoid it, and that the immoral sense enables us to perceive immorality and how to enjoy it. Pudd'nhead Wilson's New Calendar. Melbourne spreads around over an immense area of ground. It is a stately city architecturally as well as in magnitude. It has an elaborate system of cable car service. It has museums and colleges and schools and public gardens and electricity and gas and libraries and theaters and mining centers and wool centers of the arts and sciences and boards of trade and ships and railroads and a harbor and social clubs and journalistic clubs and racing clubs and a squatter club sumptuously housed and appointed and as many churches and banks as can make a living. In a word, it is equipped with everything that goes to make the modern great city. It is the largest city of Australasia and fills the post with honor and credit. It has one specialty. This must not be jumbled in with those other things. It is the mitred metropolitan of the horse racing cult. Its race ground is the Mecca of Australasia. On the great annual day of sacrifice, the 5th of November, Guy Fawkes's Day, business is suspended over a stretch of land and sea as wide as from New York to San Francisco, and deeper than from the northern lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. And every man and woman, of high degree or low, who can afford the expense, put away their other duties and come. They begin to swarm in by ship and rail a fortnight before the day, and they swarm thicker and thicker day after day, until all the vehicles of transportation are taxed to their uttermost to meet the demands of the occasion, and all hotels and lodgings are bulging outward because of the pressure from within. They come 100,000 strong, as all the best authorities say, and they pack the spacious grounds and grandstands, and make a spectacle such as is never to be seen in Australasia elsewhere. It is the Melbourne Cup that brings this multitude together. Their clothes have been ordered long ago, at unlimited cost, and without bounds as to beauty and magnificence, and have been kept in concealment until now, for unto this day are they consecrate. I am speaking of the ladies' clothes, but one might know that. And so the grandstands make a brilliant and wonderful spectacle, a delirium of color, a vision of beauty. The champagne flows, everybody is vivacious, excited, happy. Everybody bets, and gloves and fortunes change hands right along all the time. Day after day, the races go on, and the fun and the excitement are kept at white heat. And when each day is done, the people dance all night so as to be fresh for the race in the morning. And at the end of the great week, the swarms secure lodgings and transportation for next year, then flock away to their remote homes and count their gains and losses, and order next year's cup clothes, and then lie down and sleep 2 weeks, and get up sorry to reflect that a whole year must be put in somehow or other before they can be wholly happy again. The Melbourne Cup is the Australasian National Day. It would be difficult to overstate its importance. It overshadows all other holidays and specialized days of whatever sort in that congeries of colonies. Overshadows them? I might almost say it blots them out. Each of them gets attention, but not everybody else. Each of them evokes interest, but not everybody else. Each of them rouses enthusiasm, but not everybody else. In each case, a part of the attention, interest, and enthusiasm is a matter of habit and custom, and another part of it is official and perfunctory. Cup Day and Cup Day only commands an attention, an interest, and an enthusiasm which are universal and spontaneous, not perfunctory. Cup Day is supreme. It has no rival. I can call to mind no specialized annual day, in any country, which can be named by that large name, supreme. I can call to mind no specialized annual day, in any country, whose approach fires the whole land with a conflagration of conversation and preparation and anticipation and jubilation. No day save this one, but this one does it. In America, we have no annual supreme day, no day whose approach makes the whole nation glad. We have the 4th of July and Christmas and Thanksgiving. Neither of them can claim the primacy. Neither of them can arouse an enthusiasm which comes near to being universal. 8 grown Americans out of 10 dread the coming of the 4th, with its pandemonium and its perils, and they rejoice when it is gone, if still alive. The approach of Christmas brings harassment and dread to many excellent people. They have to buy a cartload of presents, and they never know what to buy to hit the various tastes. They put in 3 weeks of hard and anxious work, and when Christmas morning comes, they are so dissatisfied with the result, and so disappointed that they want to sit down and cry. Then they give thanks that Christmas comes but once a year. The observance of Thanksgiving Day as a function has become general of late years. The thankfulness is not so general. This is natural. Two-thirds of the nation have always had hard luck and a hard time during the year, and this has a calming effect upon their enthusiasm. We have a supreme day, a sweeping and tremendous and tumultuous day, a day which commands an absolute universality of interest and excitement, but it is not annual. It comes but once in 4 years, therefore it cannot count as a rival of the Melbourne Cup. In Great Britain and Ireland, they have two great days, Christmas and the Queen's birthday, but they are equally popular, there is no supremacy. I think it must be conceded that the position of the Australasian Day is unique, solitary, unfellowed, and likely to hold that high place a long time. The next things which interest us when we travel are, first, the people, next, the novelties, and finally the history of the places and countries visited. Novelties are rare in cities which represent the most advanced civilization of the modern day. When one is familiar with such cities in the other parts of the world, he is in effect familiar with the cities of Australasia. The outside aspects will furnish little that is new. There will be new names, but the things which they represent will sometimes be found to be less new than their names. There may be shades of difference, but these can easily be too fine for detection by the incompetent eye of the passing stranger. In the larrikin, he will not be able to discover a new species, but only an old one met elsewhere, and variously called loafer, rough, tough, bummer, or blatherskite, according to his geographical distribution. The larrikin differs by a shade from those others, in that he is more sociable toward the stranger than they, more kindly disposed, more hospitable, more hearty, more friendly. At least it seemed so to me, and I had opportunity to observe. In Sydney, at least. In Melbourne, I had to drive to and from the lecture theatre, but in Sydney I was able to walk both ways and did it. Every night on my way home at 10 or a quarter past, I found the larrikin grouped in considerable force at several of the street corners, and he always gave me this pleasant salutation. "Hello, Mark. Here S to you, old chap." Say, Mark, is he dead? A reference to a passage in some book of mine, though I did not detect at that time that that was its source. And I didn't detect it afterward in Melbourne, when I came on the stage for the first time, and the same question was dropped down upon me from the dizzy height of the gallery. It is always difficult to answer a sudden inquiry like that, when you have come unprepared and don't know what it means. I will remark here, if it is not an indecorum, that the welcome which an American lecturer gets from a British colonial audience is a thing which will move him to his deepest deeps, and veil his sight and break his voice. And from Winnipeg to Africa, experience will teach him nothing. He will never learn to expect it. It will catch him as a surprise each time. The war cloud hanging black over England and America made no trouble for me. I was a prospective prisoner of war, but at dinners, suppers on the platform, and elsewhere, there was never anything to remind me of it. This was hospitality of the right metal, and would have been prominently lacking in some countries in the circumstances. And speaking of the war flurry, it seemed to me to bring to light the unexpected, in a detail or two. It seemed to relegate the war talk to the politicians on both sides of the water, whereas whenever a prospective war between two nations had been in the air theretofore, the public had done most of the talking and the bitterest. The attitude of the newspapers was new also. I speak of those of Australasia and India, for I had access to those only. They treated the subject argumentatively and with dignity, not with spite and anger. That was a new spirit, too, and not learned of the French and German press, either before Sedan or since. I heard many public speeches, and they reflected the moderation of the journals. The outlook is that the English-speaking race will dominate the earth 100 years from now, if its sections do not get to fighting each other. It would be a pity to spoil that prospect by baffling and retarding wars when arbitration would settle their differences so much better and also so much more definitely. No, as I have suggested, novelties are rare in the great capitals of modern times. Even the wool exchange in Melbourne could not be told from the familiar stock exchange of other countries. Wool brokers are just like stockbrokers. They all bounce from their seats and put up their hands and yell in unison. No stranger can tell what, and the president calmly says, "Sold to Smith and Co., threepence farthing, next," when probably nothing of the kind happened, for how should he know? In the museums you will find acres of the most strange and fascinating things, but all museums are fascinating, and they do so tire your eyes and break your back and burn out your vitalities with their consuming interest. You always say you will never go again, but you do go. The palaces of the rich in Melbourne are much like the palaces of the rich in America, and the life in them is the same, but there the resemblance ends. The grounds surrounding the American palace are not often large, and not often beautiful, But in the Melbourne case, the grounds are often dukely spacious, and the climate and the gardeners together make them as beautiful as a dream. It is said that some of the country seats have grounds, domains, about them which rival in charm and magnitude those which surround the country mansion of an English lord, but I was not out in the country. I had my hands full in town. And what was the origin of this majestic city and its efflorescence of palatial townhouses and country seats? Its first brick was laid, and its first house built by a passing convict. Australian history is almost always picturesque. Indeed, it is so curious and strange that it is itself the chiefest novelty the country has to offer, and so it pushes the other novelties into second and third place. It does not read like history, but like the most beautiful lies, and all of a fresh new sort, no moldy old stale ones. It is full of surprises and adventures and incongruities and contradictions and incredibilities, but they are all true, they all happened. Chapter 17. The English are mentioned in the Bible. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Pudd'nhead Wilson's New Calendar. When we consider the immensity of the British Empire in territory, population, and trade, it requires a stern exercise of faith to believe in the figures which represent Australasia's contribution to the empire's commercial grandeur. As compared with the landed estate of the British Empire, the landed estate dominated by any other power except one, Russia, is not very impressive for size. My authorities make the British Empire not much short of a fourth larger than the Russian Empire. Roughly proportioned, if you will allow your entire hand to represent the British Empire, you may then cut off the fingers a trifle above the middle joint of the middle finger, and what is left of the hand will represent Russia. The populations ruled by Great Britain and China are about the same, 400 million each. No other power approaches these figures. Even Russia is left far behind. The population of Australasia, 4 million, sinks into nothingness, and is lost from sight in that British ocean of 400 million. Yet the statistics indicate that it rises again and shows up very conspicuously when its share of the empire's commerce is the matter under consideration. The value of England's annual exports and imports is stated at $3 billion, New South Wales Blue Book, and it is claimed that more than one-tenth of this great aggregate is represented by Australasia's exports to England and imports from England. In addition to this, Australasia does a trade with countries other than England, amounting to $100 million a year, and a domestic intercolonial trade amounting to 150 millions. In round numbers, the 4 million buy and sell about $600 million worth of goods a year. It is claimed that about half of this represents commodities of Australasian production. The products exported annually by India are worth a trifle over $500 million. $1 now, here are some faith-straining figures. Indian production, 300 million population, $500 million. Australasian production, 4 million population, $300 million. That is to say, the product of the individual Indian, annually, for export some whither, is worth $1.75. That of the individual Australasian, for export some whither, $75. Or to put it in another way, the Indian family of man and wife and 3 children sends away an annual result worth $8. $75, while the Australasian family sends away $375 worth. There are trustworthy statistics furnished by Sir Richard Temple and others, which show that the individual Indian's whole annual product, both for export and home use, is worth in gold only $7. $50 or $37. $50 for the family aggregate. Ciphered out on a like ratio of multiplication, the Australasian family's aggregate production would be nearly $1,600. Truly, nothing is so astonishing as figures if they once get started. We left Melbourne by rail for Adelaide, the capital of the vast province of South Australia, a 17-hour excursion. On the train we found several Sydney friends, among them a judge who was going out on circuit and was going to hold court at Broken Hill, where the celebrated silver mine is. It seemed a curious road to take to get to that region. Broken Hill is close to the western border of New South Wales, and Sydney is on the eastern border. A fairly straight line, 700 miles long, drawn westward from Sydney, would strike Broken Hill, just as a somewhat shorter one drawn west from Boston would strike Buffalo. The way the judge was traveling would carry him over 2,000 miles by rail, he said. Southwest from Sydney down to Melbourne, then northward up to Adelaide, then a camp back northeastward and over the border into New South Wales once more, to Broken Hill. It was like going from Boston southwest to Richmond, Virginia, then northwest up to Erie, Pennsylvania, then a camp back northeast and over the border, to Buffalo, New York. But the explanation was simple. Years ago, the fabulously rich silver discovery at Broken Hill burst suddenly upon an unexpected world. Its stock started at shillings and went by leaps and bounds to the most fanciful figures. It was one of those cases where the cook puts a month's wages into shares and comes next month and buys your house at your own price and moves into it herself. Where the coachman takes a few shares and next month sets up a bank. And where the common sailor invests the price of a spree and the next month buys out the steamship company and goes into business on his own hook. In a word, it was one of those excitements which bring multitudes of people to a common center with a rush and whose needs must be supplied, and at once. Adelaide was close by, Sydney was far away. Adelaide threw a short railway across the border before Sydney had time to arrange for a long one. It was not worthwhile for Sydney to arrange at all. The whole vast trade profit of Broken Hill fell into Adelaide's hands, irrevocably. New South Wales law furnishes for Broken Hill and sends her judges 2,000 miles, mainly through alien countries, to administer it, but Adelaide takes the dividends and makes no moan. We started at 4:20 in the afternoon and moved across level plains until night. In the morning we had a stretch of scrub country, the kind of thing which is so useful to the Australian novelist. In the scrub the hostile aboriginal lurks and flits mysteriously about, slipping out from time to surprise and slaughter the settler, then slipping back again and leaving no track that the white man can follow. In the scrub the novelist's heroine gets lost, search fails of result. She wanders here and there and finally sinks down exhausted and unconscious, and the searchers pass within a yard or two of her, not suspecting that she is near and by some rambler, finds her bones and the pathetic diary which she had scribbled with her failing hand and left behind. Nobody can find a lost heroine in the scrub but the aboriginal tracker, and he will not lend himself to the scheme if it will interfere with the novelist's plot. The scrub stretches miles and miles in all directions, and looks like a level roof of bush tops without a break or a crack in it, as seamless as a blanket to all appearance. One might as well walk under water and hope to guess out a route and stick to it, I should think. Yet it is claimed that the aboriginal tracker was able to hunt out people lost in the scrub, also in the bush, also in the desert, and even follow them over patches of bare rocks and over alluvial ground which had to all appearance been washed clear of footprints. From reading Australian books and talking with the people, I became convinced that the Aboriginal tracker's performances evince a craft, a penetration, a luminous sagacity, and a minuteness and accuracy of observation in the matter of detective work not found in nearly so remarkable a degree in any other people, white or colored. In an official account of the blacks of Australia published by the Government of Victoria, one reads that the Aboriginal not only notices the faint marks left on the bark of a tree by the claws of a climbing opossum, but knows in some way or other whether the marks were made today or yesterday. And there is the case, on record, where a settler, makes a bet with B that B may lose a cow as effectually as he can, and A will produce an Aboriginal who will find her. B selects a cow and lets the tracker see the cow's footprint, then be put under guard. B then drives the cow a few miles over a course which drifts in all directions and frequently doubles back upon itself. And he selects difficult ground all the time, and once or twice even drives the cow through herds of other cows and mingles her tracks in the wide confusion of theirs. He finally brings his cow home. The Aboriginal is set at liberty, and at once moves around in a great circle, examining all cow tracks until he finds the one he is after, then sets off and follows it throughout its erratic course, and ultimately tracks it to the stable where B has hidden the cow. Now, wherein does one cow track differ from another? There must be a difference, or the tracker could not have performed the feat. A difference minute, shadowy, and not detectable by you or me, or by the late Sherlock Holmes, and yet discernible by a member of a race charged by some people with occupying the bottom place in the gradations of human intelligence.